I didn't see my life tilting until it had already slid off the table. If you had asked me 6 months before the day everything fell apart, I would have told you that God had finally remembered me, that love had arrived in a soft shirt with ink on his fingers and a way of listening that made quiet sound like safety. I would have told you my cousin Ariba and I were still the kind of girls who could share a mirror and a lipstick and a laugh without measuring who got the bigger half. I would have told you an engagement is a lantern you carry down a street while the whole neighborhood cheers. No one tells you how quickly lanterns can turn into fire. I met our eyes in a library that always smelled faintly of dust and rain, even in summer. He was hunched over a table with a stack of architecture books and a pencil tucked behind his ear, the picture of someone who builds things that stand. I was there to return a novel the librarian had pressed into my hands because she said, "You like women who save themselves." When I dropped it at the desk, it slipped from my fingers and clapped the wood, and he looked up like the sound was a question and I was the answer. Later he told me it wasn't love at first sight, it was relief at first sight. Like he'd finally found the person he was supposed to tell the small thoughts to, the ones that don't fit in grown-up conversation. He asked me which book I was returning. I held up the cover like proof of something I hadn't figured out yet. He smiled without exposing his teeth and said, "Do you want coffee or an excuse not to study?" I said yes because both sounded like rescue. He didn't perform romance. He kept stumbling into it. He'd text me photos of crooked staircases and ask which step I'd sit on to cry and which one to laugh. He'd send voice notes of late-night trains passing because he said the rhythm sounded like my thoughts when I was trying to be brave. We sat on stoops and counted stray cats. He learned my tea the way other men learn the price of watches. When he proposed, he didn't kneel. He sat beside me on a park bench with varnish peeling in strips and told me he wanted to build a boring life with me. Grocery lists and leaky faucets and fights about who left the light on, and I said yes because boring with him sounded like miracle. My mother cried the way mothers cry when they realize the house is going to be less noisy. My father pretended not to wipe his eyes with his sleeve and then said the exact right sentence a father can say. "If he hurts you, I'll be older than him but I can still be unwise." We took photos under the bougainvillea that spills over our gate like glamour, and my cheeks ached from smiling, and neighbors I only ever waved to perform the ancient choreography of joy, bringing plates of sweets and advice wrapped in plastic containers we promised to return and never did. Even Ariba squealed like she meant it, crushed me in a hug that smelled of hairspray, and whispered, "Finally you're catching up." I pretended not to notice the word catching. Ariba and I are exactly 6 months apart. We learned to walk holding the same coffee table. We learned to lie at the same time too, first about who ate the last biscuit, then about boys whose names we never wrote down. She was the star always. The way she moved through a room made people rearrange themselves to be near her. She could turn a silence into applause. I have never envied her shine. I always thought of myself as her soft landing. When she tripped, I would be there with the rug. When she got bored, I would finish the conversation. When she cried, I would make the tea strong and sweet, the way she liked her dramas. I knew the choreography of being the one who steadies. I didn't know how to stop when the music changed. Wedding planning is not a plan. It's a storm. It blew up our lives and shook glitter into our hair and then asked why we looked messy. Aunties measured my happiness by the size of the stage we hadn't rented yet. An uncle sent me Excel sheets like blessings. My mother and I searched markets for fabric that didn't give up after 3 wears. Everyone gave opinions as if they were paying for them. Ariba gave the most. "Don't take that venue," she'd say. "Its lighting is cruel. Don't choose that song, people will yawn. Don't invite her. She'll dress like it's her own wedding." I took some of her advice because it was good and because she had a talent for spectacle, and I let the rest wash past me because getting married is also the practice of not drowning. The first wrongness came quietly, like a draft under a closed door. 2 days after we announced the date, my phone buzzed with a message from our eyes. "Weird question," he wrote. "Did you ever date Hamza?" Hamza was my old neighbor with a motorbike that sounded like insecurity. I had never dated him. He had tried to teach me to ride and I had almost driven into a mango cart. The only thing between us was embarrassment. "No," I typed. "Why?" He replied with a screenshot of a conversation with Ariba. "LOL, she used to write his last name after hers in school." She'd written, "Ask her." I stared at the screen like it might confess. Then I called her. "Relax," she laughed. her voice echoing like she was in a bathroom busy with eyeliner. I was just teasing him. Don't be so serious. He's so serious. It's cute. I said. Don't do that again. She sighed the sigh of a woman putting up with a child and said, Fine. She didn't stop. At dinner the next week with both our families, the kind of event where plates clink and fathers try to tell jokes that offend no one, she raised her glass and said, To my cousin, who practiced signing Mrs. in her notebook on every page. Let's hope she gets the right name this time. It landed like confetti to everyone else, but I watched R.I.'s face pinch around the eyes, the way people wince at a pitch that's slightly off. Later he asked, almost shy, Were you in love with someone else? I said no. He nodded like he believed me and then didn't touch me as we walked to the car. Small cracks aim for the places you already know you're thin. I had spent years being told I was stable, nice, dependable. Words that sound like compliments and feel like a beige sweater. I wasn't the dramatic one. I was the plate warmer, the one who made sure the food didn't go cold while beauty happened at the table. Now drama had come to my door wearing my cousin's perfume. I wanted to handle it with grace, which is code for don't make noise. But sabotage has a volume. 3 weeks before the wedding, R.I.'s sister Sana called me. We were almost friends. We had planned sari shopping for the weekend. I liked her quiet sarcasm and the way she held her mother's hand in public like a habit. Her voice was stiff the way people get when they've been holding a heavy thought too long. I don't know how to ask this, she began. Did you send pictures to someone? I blinked so hard my lashes scraped my eyelids. What? She sent screenshots. A fake handle. Blurry photos of my face cut onto someone else's body with the kind of editing you can do for free in apps designed for children. Messages that said things like, Wish you were here, not my fiancé. Spelled with the kind of grammar that betrays a liar. It would have been laughable if it hadn't leaned so confidently on a stereotype that pretty girls are careless with their dignity and that good men are always almost victims. This is obviously fake, I said. Obviously, she said back, but her tone had a tremor. I'll talk to R.I.'s, I said. Please, she whispered. R.I.'s listened with his lips pressed thin. I know it's fake, he said. I know. He didn't hold my hand. But why is this happening? I asked. He shook his head. Maybe we need to slow down, he said. Maybe the families. He didn't finish the sentence because the parts after maybe were a cliff he didn't want to see. Do you trust me? I asked, and the room held its breath, and he said, I want to. It was the most honest sentence and the most fatal. He didn't say he did. He said he wanted to, as if trust were a staircase he might climb if his shoes fit. We argued without raising our voices, which is worse. He said, You don't know the pressure I'm under. I said, You don't know the pressure I've always been under. He said, My mother thinks, I said, I am not marrying your mother. He said, That's not fair. I said, Fairness isn't the point. Courage is. We collided softly and left bruises that didn't show. 2 weeks before the wedding, his family stopped answering my mother's calls. Sana texted, I'm trying. The photographer sent a polite message asking if the pre-shoot was still on. The Mindy choreographer, hired by Ariba with her usual flourish, sent me a playlist and said, It's going to break the internet. I wanted to break something else. My father watched me as if I were a glass he'd set too close to the edge. My mother kept cooking elaborate meals like she could feed my sadness until it fell asleep. The engagement was called off on a Thursday, because pain likes to arrive on days that think they're practical. R.I.'s came to our house with his father, both of them in shirts that looked more expensive than apologies. He said, We need time. I said, Time does not cure doubt, it feeds it. He looked at the floor, at the rug my mother had ironed that morning as if fabric could be a prayer. His father cleared his throat the way men do when they want to sound wise. In these matters, it is better to be careful. My father stood beside me like a column. He said, In these matters, it is better to be kind. They left. The silence they left behind had weight. Ariba posted a photo the next day in a red dress that bled confidence, captioned, Sometimes God redirects you to what you deserve. The comments were thirsty as usual. Queen. Always winning. Someone wrote, Who hurt you? And she replied with a winking emoji. I wanted to write I did not deserve this, But I swallowed the sentence because I have been taught not to hand dignity to the internet in exchange for crumbs. I didn't leave my room for 3 days. I lay there and let the ceiling stare at me until it softened into something I could bear. My mother came in every few hours with water and fruit cut into careful triangles and stories that didn't require answers. On the 4th day, I got up and washed my hair like repentance. I cleaned my room the way people do in movies when they are turning their life around. In real life, it just made the dust sit in piles that looked like proof I had existed somewhere else. I put on lipstick and walked to the market and bought coriander and a notebook. I wrote because writing has never asked me to pretend I'm fine. I wrote about the way sabotage feels glamorous to the saboteur and like mud to the sabotaged. I wrote about cousins who love you as long as love is a mirror. I wrote about men who want to be brave and put their armor on only when their mothers say it matches. I wrote about how humiliation can be an inheritance you refuse to pass down. I wrote until my hand cramped, and then I switched to typing and the words came out like clumsy birds and I didn't apologize for their shape. Hira, who has been my friend since we both got sent to the principal's office for laughing in class and ended up making the principal laugh too, read what I wrote and said, "Send it." "To who?" I asked. "To anyone who knows how to read," she said. I submitted a piece to a small literary site that pays in gratitude and email signatures. They responded in 24 hours with an acceptance and a line that made me cry. "We don't usually publish personal essays, but yours felt like a window." The comments were brutal and kind in equal measure. One woman wrote, "My sister ruined my marriage and still borrows my clothes." Another wrote, "I was a Reba and I hate that I was." I replied to every message with an honesty that surprised me, and an anger that didn't. A week later, Sana showed up at our door. She looked like the inside of a bruise, yellow and purple and fading. "I found the email," she said. She had traced the burner account to my cousin's old laptop. She had proof. Screenshots. IP logs. I didn't ask how, because sometimes the universe uses people with access to the right kind of nephew. "I told RIs," she said. "He's..." She didn't finish because words like ashamed and devastated make people feel noble. Let him feel smaller than that. He called me 3 times that night and I ignored all 3 because I wanted to give myself the gift of not performing generosity. On the 4th call I answered. He said my name like he was asking to come in from the rain. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I should have trusted me," I said. He exhaled like he had been holding his breath since Thursday. "Yes," he whispered. "I don't know how to undo this." "You don't," I replied. "You live with it." He said, "Can we meet?" I said, "No," he said. "Please." I said, "You will survive this, no." When I hung up, I cried, not for him, but for the girl who had said yes on a peeling bench to a life that would have been kind if only the people in it had been. I cried the stubborn tears of someone who knows she is doing the right thing and wishes it felt more like triumph. Then I got up and made tea because grief is thirsty. Ariba arrived 2 nights later, mascara smudged like a confession. She didn't text. She knocked the way people knock when they still believe in welcome. My mother opened the door and I heard the wind of their names colliding in the hall. Ariba walked into my room with a face I knew from childhood. The face she made when she had broken my doll, and wanted me to say it wasn't her fault. "I didn't mean," she started. "You did," I said. We stood there in a room full of ordinary things that looked suddenly like witnesses. She sat on my bed like she had in every era of our lives. "I was so tired of being background," she said. "You think I get everything. I don't. I get applause. I get attention. It evaporates. No one stays. When you got engaged, everyone looked at you like you'd earned a thing I could never dance my way into. So you set fire to it," I said, not as a question. "I thought it would be drama," she whispered. "I thought he would fight for you and you would be grateful and everyone would say, 'Look how strong they are.' And I would matter because I had been the storm that proved your house was safe." I stared at her and felt the complicated mercy of understanding the logic of a crime. "You wanted to be important," I said. "At my expense." Tears slid down her face in straight lines like notes on a sheet. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that's worthless." I nodded. "It is," I said, "and because I am not only a victim," I added, "and it's also something." She reached for my hand and I moved it to fold the blanket. "Please leave," I said softly, "the way you say, 'Please let me live.'" She left. We did not speak for a long time after that. I did not die. I want that sentence carved somewhere. I went back to work. I ate food that tasted of something other than salt. I started running in the mornings because moving forward physically felt like cheating emotionally, and I have always liked a shortcut that still requires sweat. I volunteered at a community center that taught girls how to code and cook and speak into microphones. I led a workshop called What to Do with Your Ringless Finger, and we laughed so hard at the title that we had to take a water break. We made a zine filled with stories about being told to shrink and choosing to expand instead. We sold out of copies in a day and spent the next 3 weekends at the photocopy shop arguing about staples. I saw our eyes once months later in a cafe where the barista knows my name and spells it right. He walked in with a friend and I could tell he hadn't expected me to be there because he did the thing where you check if a reflection is lying. He came over slowly, as if a sudden approach might spook the future. "You look good," he said, which is what people say when they have lost the right to say beautiful. "You too," I replied, because manners are a grace you give yourself. He said, "I read your essays." I said, "I wasn't hiding them." He winced and then smiled because he knows how my words can cut without drawing blood on my hands. "I'm glad you're okay," he said. "I am not just okay," I replied. "I am more than okay some days. Some days I am still angry. Both are true." He nodded like he had memorized a fact for an exam that has no date. "I hope you find someone who would have believed you without proof," he said. "I already did," I answered, and his eyes flickered with the human desire to know more. And I let him think I meant a man. I meant myself. Sana and I kept in touch. She came to one of my workshops and cried in the bathroom afterward, apologizing for a family she is not responsible for. I told her love is not math. You cannot balance every equation. She hugged me like a sister and bought every girl in the class samosas. Later she messaged me photos from her wedding to a boy who looks like he believes women are here to be listened to, and I felt that light ache that is gratitude stretching. Ariba tried, in small ways you might not notice if you hadn't known her your whole life. She stopped posting every meal. She started volunteering at the animal shelter, and discovered that love that doesn't clap still counts. She sent my mother a tin of biscuits at Eid with a note that said, "For tea." She did not send me anything. I did not send her anything. We began again as if we had once been childhood neighbors who waved at each other on balconies and sometimes traded lemons. It was gentler than forgiveness. It was something like adulthood. One afternoon, months after the worst of it, my aunt cornered me at a family gathering and said the line older women think frees them from responsibility. "You know how she is." I looked at her and saw not cruelty but laziness. The kind of laziness that lets hurricanes be named and then refuses to build better houses. "No," I said. "I know how we made her. I know how we fed the part of her that needed applause more than air. I know how we rewarded spectacle and called truth boring. I know how we told her she was only loved when a room was looking, and then blamed her when she couldn't stand the quiet." My aunt's eyes filled, she reached for her scarf, she said, "I didn't mean," I said, "I know," and left it there because no one can apologize for an entire history at a buffet. Work grew. My essays turned into a book that smelled like new paper and relief. The cover was not a wedding dress. It was a pair of women's hands, palms up, catching rain. I went on a small tour that was really just me and Hira on buses pretending we were famous. We stayed in cheap hotels with clean sheets and laughed ourselves to sleep like the girls we had been. In a town by a river, a young woman stood up after my reading and said, "My sister took my fiancé because she was sad." I thought I would die from the embarrassment. I told her what I will tell you if you are listening and your ring finger still feels phantom weight. Embarrassment is a weather pattern, not a personality. It will pass if you refuse to arrange your furniture around it. I got a message one night from a name that vibrated my memory before my phone. "Ariba, are you awake?" she wrote. "Unfortunately," I replied because it was true. My mind was arguing with an imaginary panel of judges about whether I had been too mean in an essay that asked men to grow up. "I'm outside," she wrote. I stared at the words and thought about boundaries like fences you paint in colors you like. Then I went downstairs because curiosity is older than wisdom. She stood at the gate with a box in her hands, the kind of box jewelers use when they want the room to gasp. "Don't worry," she said quickly. "I haven't stolen anything." We smiled like we didn't know how to be our worst selves anymore. She opened the box. Inside was a delicate pair of glass birds, thin as breath. "I broke yours," she said. She meant the pair I had owned since I was a child. A silly, fragile thing we had both loved to blow on to make the faintest whistle. She had broken one in a fight years ago, and we had laughed and glued the pieces and pretended not to notice the seam. "I found these at a market," she said. "I thought maybe." "Thank you," I said. She nodded and then took a deep breath like someone about to jump into a lake. "I started therapy," she blurted. I nodded and waited because pride in surviving is different from pride in healing. "Did you?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you like it?" "I like me more after," I replied. We stood there with the box between us like a treaty. "I will not be the person you needed me to be when it happened," she said. A sentence that made me want to cheer and groan simultaneously. "I might never be your favorite," she added. "You might never be mine," I said softly. "But I would like to be your cousin again." She laughed and cried in one sound. "I can do cousin," she said. "Cousin requires less applause," I replied. She went home and I went upstairs and put the glass birds on the windowsill where the light could make them look like something that had learned to be both delicate and unafraid. A year after the engagement I received an invitation to RI's exhibition. His firm had completed a public project, a small library on the corner of two busy streets, designed so the city could walk into its own quiet. I didn't intend to go. I went because I wanted to see what he had made of his hands. The building was lovely in the way good things are, useful and shy. He saw me across the room and didn't approach. I walked through the space and touched the shelves the way you touch a child's forehead, checking for fever. On a plaque beside the entrance was a dedication. "For anyone who needs a room that doesn't ask for proof." I stood there until my eyes went soft. Later he sent a message. "Thank you for coming." I wrote back. "Thank you for building the kind of place we both needed." He sent a single emoji, a small house, and I put my phone down and let the conversation end where it should. I still get asked, in whispers and in bold, if I am over it. If by it they mean the boy, then yes, boys are not mountains unless you make them. If by it they mean the knowledge that someone you loved with your entire face set fire to your future because she wanted the smoke, then no, that knowledge sits in my ribs and wakes sometimes in winter. But grief has grown me a vocabulary. I can say boundary without apology now. I can say no without a lecture to myself afterward. I can say yes to what feeds me even if no one claps. On the anniversary of the day we were supposed to dance under lights and pretend the future was guaranteed, I cooked biryani with my mother and invited the girls from the workshop to eat on the floor because our table has never been big enough for our lives. We read aloud from our zine. We argued about whether love without apology is a myth or a goal. We cried in a way that made the room feel clean. Kira brought cake and wrote "To Brave Boring Lives" on it in messy blue icing. We sang loudly and out of key because perfection is for other people. Late that night, when the house had exhaled and the plates were stacked and the tea leaves lay soggy and spent at the bottom of the pot, I stood at the window and looked at the glass birds on the sill. They caught the last of the streetlight and turned it into something softer. I thought about the girl I was when I said yes on that bench. I blessed her for believing. I thought about the girl I was when I said no on the phone. I blessed her for leaving. I thought about Ariba, about how we are both building new choreography with fewer spins and more steps that land. I thought about RI's library full of chairs that don't demand your posture be perfect to sit down, and I smiled. If you're listening because your engagement rings around your bathtub like a ring of soap you can't clean, or because your cousin is the kind of fire that thinks burning is a love language, or because your boy is the kind of brave that looks good only in theory, take this from me like a letter slipped under your door. You are not the spectacle you refused to perform. You are not the rumor you outlived. You are not the seam in the thing someone else broke. You are the person who knows where the light falls in your own room. You are the person who can open your own window. If you must carry anything from what happened to me, carry this. Attention is loud, but it is not love. Apology is quiet, but it is not always enough. Repair is slow, and it is holy work. And sometimes being okay is the most radical thing you can be. I don't have a neat ending to offer you because my life against my better instincts is not immoral. I will tell you this instead. Some mornings I wake with my jaw unclenched. Some afternoons I let my phone die and walk the long way home past the shop where the stray dog sleeps and the auntie sells bangles and the boys argue about cricket because their voices make the air less lonely. Some nights I sit with my mother and we watch terrible serials and yell at the screen together and remember that love is often not what saves you. It is what holds your hand while you save yourself. And when I go to bed, I leave the curtains open so the sunrise has a chance to find me. It always does. It pokes at my eyelids and says, "Look." And I do. I look at the day like a room that has learned not to ask me for proof. I step into it and I live.